You know what that moment feels like. Someone hurt you deeply, deliberately, without apology. And then, after the silence, after the damage, after you rebuilt yourself from the wreckage they left behind, they come back, soft voice, sad eyes, and they say those two words, "Please forgive me." And something inside you tightens, not because you're bitter, but because something in the ancient wiring of your mind is sending you a signal, a warning. And most people ignore that warning. Most people breathe deeply, swallow the pain, and say, "I forgive you," because that's what good people do, because that's what society told you strength looks like. But I'm going to tell you something right now that will change the way you see every relationship, every apology, and every person who has ever asked you for grace after they chose to destroy yours. Forgiveness in the hands of the wrong person is not a gift. It is a weapon, and right now they are aiming it directly at you.
In 44 BC, after Julius Caesar was assassinated on the Senate floor, stabbed 23 times by men he had trusted, men he had pardoned from previous wars, historians recorded something chilling. Every single one of his assassins had once knelt before Caesar and asked for mercy. He had forgiven them, publicly, magnanimously, and they had walked away from that forgiveness not with gratitude, but with a blueprint. They learned that Caesar's mercy was a door that never locked, and on the Ides of March, they walked through it one final time with blades. Here is what they never taught you in school, in church, or at the dinner table. Not all apologies are created equal. Some apologies are confessions, but most apologies, especially the ones delivered after prolonged damage, after silence, after they watched you bleed and chose to do nothing, are transactions. Dark psychology has a name for this. It is called guilt-based reconciliation, and it works like this. The person who wronged you is not returning because they feel remorse. They are returning because the power dynamic shifted, because you stopped chasing, because your absence became louder than your presence ever was, because somewhere in the quiet of their life they felt the ground move and they realized they could no longer stand on the territory they once dominated. So they returned with softness, with vulnerability, with the performance of regret, because they know, consciously or not, that a version of you still exists that wants to believe in them. And they are making a calculated bet that your heart is softer than your memory. Machiavelli wrote that men will always betray you for profit, love, or fear. The prince who cannot read which of those three is operating in any given moment is a prince already walking toward his own assassination. Read the room. Read the timing. Ask yourself, why now? Why only after you went silent? Only after you stopped being available? Only after you became unreachable? Why is the apology arriving now? Is it because they finally understand what they did? Or is it because they finally felt what they lost? Those are two entirely different things, and only one of them is about you.
Let us talk about what happens in the invisible economy of power when you say, "I forgive you." On the surface, it looks noble, and internally, forgiveness can be one of the most sovereign acts a human being performs. Releasing the weight of someone else's sins from your own body is real. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that when you wake in the morning, expect to meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest, and forgive them before they can wound you. That internal forgiveness is armor. That internal forgiveness is yours alone. But the moment forgiveness becomes a social contract, the moment you say it out loud, perform it for an audience, allow it to be used as a key to unlock the door they once walked out of, something transfers. Your grievance, your leverage, your record of what actually happened. Because here is what a manipulator hears when you forgive them publicly. Debt cleared. We are starting from zero. And starting from zero means the history you carry, the evidence of their pattern, the hard-won knowledge of exactly how they operate, it gets handed back, quietly, politely, with a smile. And they will use it again. Not immediately, not clumsily, but they will, because the behavior that drove them to hurt you in the first place never disappeared. It simply went dormant while their access to you was removed. The moment access is restored, the pattern follows like a shadow follows a body. This is not pessimism, this is pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is the single most powerful tool in the arsenal of anyone who refuses to be a victim twice.
You need to understand why this is happening at all, because the timing is not an accident. It is never an accident. Dark psychology teaches us about the scarcity principle, the deeply human tendency to desire most intensely what is no longer available. What you can no longer have becomes, in the mind, more valuable than it ever was when it was freely given. This is not poetic. This is neurological. This is the same mechanism that makes people bid more for an item at an auction when competition appears. The same mechanism that causes someone to want the person who just walked away far more desperately than they ever wanted the person who stayed. When you went silent, when you rebuilt in the dark, when you stopped showing up where they expected you, when you became the void, you activated that mechanism in their mind. You stopped being the safe, always available option, and the mind that once took you for granted began to calculate your worth differently. So understand this with absolute clarity. They are not back because they grew. They are back because you became scarce. And scarcity is not the same as value. It is the perception of value, manufactured by your absence, not by their evolution. A man who returns to you because you became unavailable has not become safer. He has simply become more motivated. And motivation without transformation is just hunger wearing a polished suit.
Now here is where I need to draw a line that most content in this space refuses to draw, because it is uncomfortable, and uncomfortable truths do not get shared as easily as comfortable ones. You should forgive, internally, completely, not for them, not because they deserve it, but because carrying the weight of what they did costs you energy that belongs to your future. The anger, the replaying of scenarios, the 3 a.m. conversations you have in your head with a person who is not in the room, that is your power, draining through a hole in the floor. Seal it, let it go, not as an act of grace toward them, but as an act of sovereignty for yourself. But, and this is the blade beneath the velvet, releasing the emotional charge is not the same as reopening the door. You can forgive a man for burning your house down and still never hand him a match again. You can wish someone peace from a distance so great that their chaos can no longer reach you. Inner forgiveness is freedom. Public forgiveness as a social transaction is a cage dressed as a gift. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus, who was born a slave, understood better than most free men that your internal world is the only kingdom that cannot be conquered without your consent. No one can take from you what you have not offered. And offering forgiveness as a social contract is offering them the keys to a castle they already proved they will burn.
Let us go deeper into the mechanism, because understanding how it works is the only protection against it working on you again. When a manipulator asks for forgiveness, they are not asking for emotional absolution, they are performing a jailbreak. They know, from experience with you, from months or years of studying exactly where your emotional soft spots live, that your compassion is the one door in your fortress that was never fully secured. and they are knocking on it with the most powerful key they have, your own goodness. This is what makes it devastating. They are not exploiting your weakness, they are exploiting your strength, your capacity for empathy, your desire to believe in redemption, your hope that people can change. These are beautiful qualities, and in the hands of a person operating from genuine growth, they would be met with equal beauty. But in the hands of someone running a power recalibration, they are pressure points. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn to be both lion and fox, the lion to recognize traps, the fox to frighten wolves. Most people walk through life as only one. The kind ones are foxes with no teeth. The hard ones are lions with no cunning. The dangerous ones, the ones who cannot be manipulated twice, are both. They can feel the pull of compassion and simultaneously observe the architecture of the situation. They can hold softness in their chest and steel in their eyes at the same time. That is where you are going. That is what you are building.
So what do you actually do? Not theoretically, not philosophically. What do you do when the text arrives, when the call comes, when they appear in your life with that expression you recognize, the one designed specifically to unlock you? You pause. You do not react immediately. The first move belongs to whoever has the most stillness. Let their message sit, not out of pettiness, out of power. A response issued within seconds tells them your nervous system is still wired to theirs. A response issued on your own timeline tells them the dynamic has reorganized. When you do respond, if you choose to respond, you are polite, you are calm, you are warm in the way that a stone wall can be warm in afternoon sunlight, pleasant from a distance, immovable up close. You do not relitigate the past. You do not offer them a courtroom where they can perform their redemption arc. You keep the conversation surface level, brief, and completely unreadable. Because here is what they cannot work with: ambiguity. A manipulator's greatest tool is reading your emotional state and responding to it. If they cannot read you, if your warmth has no heat, your politeness has no hunger, your presence has no longing, they have nothing to grip, and a person with nothing to grip eventually loosens their hold entirely. You do not owe them a confession of your growth. You do not owe them proof that you have changed. Your evolution is not a performance staged for an audience of people who left during intermission. Let them sense the shift without understanding it. Let them feel the distance without being able to name it. That unnamed distance is your most powerful weapon, and unlike their silence, which was deployed to make you feel small, yours is deployed from a position of absolute fullness.
Here is the final truth, the one that everything else has been building toward. Every person who has ever dismissed you, ignored you, used your compassion against you, walked away thinking they left you diminished, they handed you something they did not intend to give. They handed you clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes from being shown exactly what you were accepting, exactly how little your boundaries were being respected, exactly where the cracks in your emotional architecture allowed the wrong people to enter and rearrange the furniture. Pain, when you refuse to waste it, becomes architecture. The discipline you built in their absence, the silence you learned to wear like armor, the emotional sovereignty you forged from the fire of rejection, none of that disappears when they return. It compounds. It becomes the foundation of a version of you that the person standing in front of you, the one with the soft eyes and the practiced apology, has never actually met. They remember a version of you that no longer exists, and that version, the one who would have responded immediately, who would have softened at the first sign of vulnerability, who would have traded long-term protection for short-term warmth, that version is gone, and what stands in its place is something they fundamentally did not account for in their calculation.
You are no longer the person who got hurt. You are the person who used the hurt as fuel. And there is no greater quiet power on this earth than a person who has turned their wound into their weapon, their silence into their strategy, and their absence into their empire. Forgive them internally, release the weight, but keep the lesson, keep the distance, keep the crown you earned by learning in the hardest way exactly how the game is played. Empires are not built by the forgiving, they are built by the wise. And now you are both.
If something in this video hit different, if it named something you have been carrying but couldn't put into words, then you already know this channel is where you belong. Subscribe to Noir Machiavelli, not because I told you to, because you are building something in the dark, and you need a voice in your corner that does not flinch from the truth. Drop a comment below and tell me, has someone recently asked you for forgiveness and something felt off? Let's talk about it, because you are not alone in this, and the conversation below this video is where the real strategy begins.